The Lying Messiah, Unveiling the Mystery of the Islamic Antichrist. On the Day of Judgment, an era of unprecedented darkness and confusion will blanket the earth. At the epicenter of this global turmoil will emerge a man, described in ancient texts as blind in one eye. Upon his forehead, clearly visible to those with true faith, will be inscribed a single damning word: kafir, disbeliever. This man will traverse the globe, leaving no land untouched, save for the holy sanctuaries. He will be absolutely forbidden from entering the sacred cities of Mecca and Medina, blocked by the blazing swords of angels. With him comes a great, terrible, and devoted army, ready to wage a final war against all pious believers. This terrifying apocalyptic figure is known in Islamic tradition as Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, or simply the Dajjal. Translated literally, the name means the lying Messiah, the deceiver, or the impostor. Muslim traditions regarding the end of the world describe an era of terrifying cosmic upheaval and profound moral collapse. It is a time when the fundamental laws of nature and society are inverted. Out of this chaos arises a messianic figure of justice known as the Mahdi, but also the Dajjal, the ultimate antichrist-like entity. Although the Dajjal does not appear by name within the Quran itself, he looms incredibly large in later Islamic traditions as one of the major undeniable signs of the end of days. He is a menacing figure. He is a mysterious figure. Across the centuries, he has been interpreted in a multitude of ways: as a miracle-working impostor, a brutal political tyrant, a cosmic deceiver, manipulating reality itself, or even a profound metaphor for systemic global corruption and materialism. So who or what is the Dajjal? What do the earliest, most authentic Islamic sources actually say about his arrival? How will he test humanity? And how have Muslims across generations interpreted these chilling traditions? Today, we journey into the heart of Islamic eschatology to uncover the dark truth of the great deceiver. To truly understand the Dajjal, we must look beyond the Quran and dive deep into the Hadith. The Hadith are the written reports chronicling the sayings, actions, and approvals of the Prophet Muhammad. These accounts were meticulously transmitted by chains of narrators and eventually compiled into massive, authoritative collections in the 8th and 9th centuries. While the Quran focuses heavily on the moral weight of the Day of Judgment, it offers relatively few specific details about the precise timeline and events leading up to the end of the world. Therefore, the Hadith literature is where the rich, complex, and terrifying Islamic apocalyptic imagination truly takes shape. It is within these vast collections that we find vivid, visceral descriptions of cosmic upheaval. We read of the sun rising from the west, the appearance of the Mahdi, the dramatic return of Jesus, and, of course, the terrifying rise of the Dajjal. It is important to note that Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, and other smaller Muslim communities occasionally disagree on the specific interpretations of these texts, or even on which Hadith traditions hold the most legitimacy. However, despite these theological differences, there is a universal consensus across the Islamic world. The Dajjal is a real, literal being, or a powerful force that will be unleashed upon the world at a specific, preordained moment as the ultimate trial before the Day of Judgment. There are literally hundreds of hadith detailing his arrival, his appearance, and his actions. Because they can sometimes be repetitive, we will focus on the most influential, striking, and terrifying accounts. Let us begin with a profound account recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, one of the most revered and trusted hadith collections compiled in the 9th century. This specific report describes the Prophet Muhammad warning his followers that the Dajjal will sweep across the earth, but it will be strictly forbidden for him to pass through the entrances of Medina. Finding his path blocked, he will be forced to camp in the salty, barren, desolate areas just outside the city limits. On that harrowing day, one of the best and bravest of men will step forward from the city. He will approach the towering figure of the Dajjal and boldly declare, "I testify that you are the very same Dajjal whose description was given to us by Allah's messenger." Enraged but cunning, the Dajjal will turn to the gathered crowds of onlookers and ask, "If I kill this man and then bring him back to life again, will you continue to doubt my claim to divinity?" The terrified masses will reply, "No." Then, in a shocking display of dark power, the Dajjal will brutally strike the man down, killing him instantly. But the horror does not end there. With a command, the Dajjal will seemingly resurrect the man, bringing him back to the realm of the living. Yet, the resurrected man, entirely unfazed by his own gruesome death, will look the false Messiah in the eye and state, "By God, now I know your reality even better than before. You are the liar." Furious, the Dajjal will attempt to kill the man a second time, but he will find himself mysteriously paralyzed, entirely unable to inflict harm upon the righteous believer. This incredibly tense scene drops us directly into a confrontation in the far future. The Dajjal stands outside Medina, the second holiest city in Islam, barred from entering. He performs what appears to be an impossible miracle. It is a short account, but several vital themes immediately emerge. The Dajjal is incredibly powerful. He can manipulate the forces of life and death, or at least appear to do so, but his core intention is deception and harm. Other reports within the Hadith add fascinating details about his character, and more importantly, his absolute limits. Several traditions reiterate that he will never conquer Medina, and they explain the supernatural reason why. The city will be heavily guarded by legions of angels sent directly by God. Every single gate, every entrance will be physically protected by celestial warriors with drawn swords. No matter how immense the Dajjal's earthly power appears, he cannot cross that divine boundary. Another tradition clarifies the terrifying resurrection stunt outside Medina. It explicitly states that the Dajjal does not possess the actual divine power of giving life. He is only able to kill and resurrect that specific man because God permitted it entirely as a test for humanity, and Medina is not the only protected sanctuary. Numerous traditions vehemently insist that the Dajjal will never set foot in the holy city of Mecca, the spiritual heart of the Islamic world. Some later variations and scholarly interpretations add the city of Jerusalem and Mount Sinai to this sacred list of untouchable safe havens. In other words, the entirety of the globe will be at the Dajjal's mercy, subjected to his terrifying trials, except for these specific locations guarded by insurmountable supernatural forces. The relationship between the Dajjal and true divinity is one of dark imitation. Strangely enough, there is a haunting hadith that recounts a vision experienced by the Prophet Muhammad. In this dream, the Prophet saw Jesus, known in Islam as Prophet Isa, walking peacefully around the Kaaba in Mecca. Jesus is described in vivid, beautiful detail. A man with long, flowing hair resting between his shoulders, water dripping gently from his head as if he had just bathed, his hands resting gently on the shoulders of two companions as he performed tawaf, the sacred ritual of circumambulating the Kaaba. But then the atmosphere of the dream shifted. The prophet noticed another figure lurking behind Jesus. This man had tightly curled, wiry hair. He was blind in his right eye and the blind eye bulged out grotesquely, resembling a floating grape. When the prophet asked the angels in his vision who this dark figure was, the chilling answer came, "This is Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the lying Messiah." This profound vision suggests that the Dajjal is, in essence, the dark shadow of Jesus. He is a distorted double, a counterfeit, trailing behind the truth. And just like Jesus, the Dajjal is prophesied to perform extraordinary, mind-bending miracles. His deception goes far beyond the resurrection stunt outside Medina. The Hadith warn that the Dajjal will traverse the earth, healing those afflicted with leprosy. He will cure paralysis and restore sight to the blind. He will speak to the sky, and rain will fall at his command. He will command the earth, and bountiful crops will spring up instantly from barren soil. He will call out to long-dead livestock, and they will rise. He will move mountains, and according to some interpretations, even halt the movement of the sun. In a terrifying sense, he moves through the world, acting exactly like a true Messiah. But his heart is completely devoid of divine grace. He only performs these astonishing feats to manipulate the vulnerable, to garner worship, and to build a massive global following for his own evil cause. In other chilling accounts, he is described as having the power to literally invert nature itself. He will turn water into fire, and fire into cold, refreshing water. He will manipulate human perception to such an extreme degree that he will convince billions that heaven is actually hell, and that hell is actually heaven. The Prophet Muhammad warned his followers, "Shall I not tell you about the Dajjal, a story of which no prophet ever told his nation? The Dajjal is one-eyed, and will bring with him what will resemble hell and paradise, and what he will call paradise will actually be hell." The theological concept at play here is istidraj, a divine test where a person or entity is granted extraordinary power or worldly success, not as a reward. The Dajjal will possess immense, unparalleled power to persuade people toward a false message, leading them directly away from eternal salvation. The Islamic traditions do not take this lightly. The Dajjal is universally treated as the greatest, most difficult trial that human beings will ever face from the creation of Adam until the day of judgment. To protect themselves from this supreme deception, Muslims are highly encouraged to memorize and frequently recite the first 10 verses of the 18th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, the cave. Believers are also told that the Prophet himself would constantly invoke the protection of God against the trial of the Dajjal in his daily prayers. As we've seen in the Prophet's dream vision, the Dajjal possesses highly distinctive physical characteristics. The most prominent is his impaired vision. One report states it plainly, "Allah is not one-eyed, and behold that the Dajjal is blind of the right eye, and his eye would be like a floating grape." This unsettling description appears in multiple verified reports and serves as his most recognizable feature. On a purely literal level, this is a physical description given to humanity, so that believers can quickly identify the impostor when he arrives. However, throughout history, many profound Muslim scholars, mystics, and philosophers have read this physical impairment as a reflection of a much deeper spiritual defect. The Dajjal has only one functioning eye. He can only see the material world. He is completely blind to the spiritual reality, blind to the divine truth. Consequently, those who choose to follow the Dajjal become spiritually blind themselves, losing the ability to perceive God's designs for humanity, consumed entirely by materialism and worldly desires. But there is another physical feature detailed in the texts that is arguably even more dramatic. Prophecy states that between the eyes of the Dajjal, boldly stamped across his forehead, will be written three distinct Arabic letters, Kaf, Fa, Ra. This spells the word kafir, meaning disbeliever or infidel. It designates someone who actively rejects or denies the existence of God and the teachings of the prophets. This divine branding makes his true nature absolutely unmistakable. No matter how persuasive his arguments might be, no matter how spectacular and breathtaking his miracles are, he stands entirely outside the bounds of true faith. Some hadith add an intriguing psychological twist to this mark. Not everyone will be able to see it. The Dajjal's followers, blinded by their greed and desire for his miracles, will be completely unable to perceive the warning on his forehead. But the true believers, regardless of whether they are highly educated scholars or completely illiterate, will be given the spiritual sight to read the word clearly and recognize the great deceiver for what he truly is. As for his overall appearance, the ancient traditions paint a monstrous picture. He is described as having wild, coarse, curly hair that sticks up resembling the tangled branches of a dead tree. He walks with a strange, unusual gait, his toes turned inward. He is exceptionally pale, towering in height, and his remaining eye glows unnervingly like the morning star. While the exact details can vary slightly from one tradition to another, the overarching message remains incredibly clear. The Dajjal is not meant to be subtle. He is not hiding in the shadows. His appearance is bizarre, imposing, and highly distinctive. In theory, armed with this knowledge, believers should be able to spot him instantly. But the tragedy of the end times is that the allure of his false miracles will blind the masses to these obvious red flags. Where does the ultimate enemy come from? The origins of the Dajjal are highly disputed within the texts, adding to his mysterious aura. Some prominent accounts declare that he will emerge from the east, specifically from a historical region known as Khorasan, which roughly spans the modern borders of Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. One hadith states, "He shall emerge from the land in the east called Khorasan. He is followed by people who appear as if their faces are shields coated with leather." While this account sounds cryptic to modern ears, it suggests the Dajjal will march from a distant land, bringing a massive, foreign army with him. Another report specifies that his earliest and most devoted followers will hail from the city of Isfahan in modern-day Iran. Scholars such as David Cook have noted fascinating parallels here. They float the theory that the mention of Khorasan might be linguistically or culturally linked to the biblical town of Chorazin, which, according to some ancient Christian traditions, is the supposed birthplace of the Antichrist. Jesus himself mentions Chorazin in the Gospels. Occasionally, the traditions state the Dajjal will come from a Jewish background, while other accounts insist he will be born from a specific Arab tribe located in today's Saudi Arabia. Still, other reports list a vast, chaotic amalgamation of groups among his staunch supporters: nomadic Bedouin Arabs, Turkic warriors, magicians, individuals born out of wedlock, and those living on the fringes of society. The identity of his followers shifts constantly depending on the historical source you consult. But what is universally agreed upon is that his earthly army will be massive. Furthermore, the texts claim he will not only lead humans, the Dajjal will have unrestricted access to legions of shayatin, demons, who will eagerly assist him in his global war against humanity, helping him maintain his elaborate illusions. Despite his immense power, his terrifying legions, and his reality-bending magic, The Dajjal's ultimate defeat is preordained by God. In fact, his chaotic reign of terror, followed by his swift, absolute destruction, is his most defining narrative feature in Islam. The Hadith literature describes his tyrannical time on earth as lasting either 40 days or 40 years. But like everything involving the Dajjal, time itself becomes distorted and unnatural. According to one deeply unsettling report, these 40 days will not behave like ordinary days. The Prophet warned that the Dajjal's first day on earth will feel as long as an entire year. His second day will last as long as a month. His third day will be like a week, and only the remaining days will pass like normal 24-hour periods. Another report, utilizing a completely different cosmic timescale, states that he will reign for 40 years. But time will accelerate so rapidly that an entire day will pass in the time it takes to burn a single dry palm branch. Exactly when this terrifying, time-warped period officially begins is shrouded in prophetic mystery. Some hadith closely link the emergence of the Dajjal to the prophesied conquest of Constantinople, suggesting these apocalyptic events will trigger in a rapid domino effect once the city falls. Other traditions map out a specific geographical path. After being humiliated and rejected by the angels guarding Mecca and Medina, the enraged Dajjal will turn his massive army north, marching toward the Levant, heading deep into Syria. It is here, in the lands of the Levant, that the ultimate showdown of human history will occur. And Jesus plays the central, heroic role in this final act. Islamic eschatology prophesies that at the height of the Dajjal's power, when the believers are cornered and the world seems utterly lost to darkness, Jesus, Isa, will physically descend from the heavens. He will arrive, resting his hands on the wings of two angels, descending upon a white minaret at the Umayyad Mosque in the ancient city of Damascus. From Damascus, Jesus will track down the great deceiver. The exact location of their confrontation depends slightly on the historical report. One highly prominent tradition places this ultimate battle at the Gate of Lud, modern-day Lod, located northwest of Jerusalem. Other reports suggest the clash will happen in the valleys of Turkey or near the ancient cities of Antioch or Aleppo. Regardless of the precise geography, the outcome is identical in every single tradition. The Dajjal does not survive this encounter. In fact, the climax is incredibly dramatic. In many accounts, a prolonged physical battle doesn't even take place. The Dajjal, the tyrant who brought the world to its knees, is fundamentally a creature of falsehood. When he is finally forced to face Jesus, the embodiment of divine truth, the Dajjal's power simply evaporates. The texts say that the moment the Dajjal lays his single eye upon Jesus, he will begin to dissolve and melt away, just as salt melts in water. Jesus will then strike him definitively, ending the deception once and for all, proving to the world that the Dajjal was a frail mortal, not a god. Especially within Shia traditions, the figure who leads the righteous forces and ultimately corners the Dajjal is the Mahdi. The Mahdi, whose name means the rightly guided one, occupies a central role in the end times. He is the leader behind whom Jesus will pray upon his descent. In many Shia communities, the Mahdi is revered as the divinely guided 12th Imam, who has been in occultation and will return to restore perfect justice to a broken world. It is profoundly fitting that the Mahdi and Jesus unite to eliminate the Dajjal, the ultimate embodiment of tyranny, corruption, and global deception. As we absorb these epic narratives, it is crucial to understand the historical context. The hadith we have been exploring were largely compiled over the course of 150 to 200 years, following the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE. This oral-to-written historical process helps explain why we possess so many varying accounts of the Dajjal, and why they sometimes feel like slightly different vantage points of the exact same event. Similar themes circulated rapidly across multiple geographic regions and scholarly collections, occasionally picking up local details or slight shifts in theological emphasis. Scholars of comparative religion have long been fascinated by the Dajjal, noting that he is strikingly similar to the Antichrist figure found in Christian eschatology. Even the linguistic roots of his name are incredibly suggestive. The Arabic term Dajjal is a direct cognate of the ancient Syriac word dagal, which also translates to false, deceitful, or spurious. Historically, some Syriac-speaking Christian communities utilized the specific phrase Mashiach Dagaluta to describe a false messiah. This is practically identical to the Arabic phrasing Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. Furthermore, one specific hadith refers to the Dajjal as Al-Masih al-Kadhdhab, literally meaning the anointed liar, reinforcing this linguistic and thematic bridge. As we've discussed, the hadith deeply intertwine the fate of the Dajjal with Jesus and the Mahdi. When the story is viewed holistically, the Antichrist parallel becomes impossible to ignore. Jesus and the Dajjal are cast as absolute cosmic opposites: truth and falsehood, authentic divinity and cheap counterfeit, locked in a destined final showdown. This conceptual pairing clearly suggests a degree of cross-cultural interaction. The early Muslims were living side by side with vibrant Jewish and Christian communities in the Middle East. The apocalyptic traditions of these Abrahamic faiths were well known, highly discussed, and inevitably influenced the broader regional understanding of end times theology. Other historians argue that the Dajjal also shares DNA with a lesser-known, highly terrifying figure from medieval Jewish apocalyptic literature known as Armilus. Armilus is described as a deceptive, anti-messianic tyrant who will conquer the earth before the final divine victory. In all three major Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we find this recurring archetype, a supremely deceptive, powerful end times opponent who rises to test humanity before God's ultimate triumph. Beyond the literal apocalyptic timeline, the Dajjal has sparked incredible philosophical and mystical interpretations over the centuries. Some medieval Islamic texts propose the terrifying idea that there will not just be one Dajjal, but a long series of them. The texts claim there will be 30 lesser Dajjals, charismatic liars and false prophets, who will emerge throughout history. What separates these lowercase Dajjals from the final capital D Dajjal is that the final one will actually possess the audacity to claim to be the creator of the universe. The others act merely as historical forerunners, slowly normalizing deception. The legendary Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi, along with generations of later Islamic philosophers influenced by his profound esoteric thought, interpreted this sequence of lesser Dajjals as part of what the Quran terms the friends of Satan. In Islamic theology, there are the friends of God, awliya Allah, righteous individuals who form a kind of hidden spiritual hierarchy, maintaining balance in the world. Ibn Arabi and others imagined a dark mirror to this, a shadow hierarchy aligned entirely with ego, deception, and materialism. In this profound mystical view, the Dajjal is not solely a physical monster waiting in the future. He is the ultimate culmination of a broader, satanic current that has been running parallel to sacred history since the dawn of man. Other Sufi authors focus deeply on the psychological dimensions of the Dajjal's deception. They expanded on the concept of istidraj. They warned that extraordinary abilities, sudden immense wealth, or global success are not necessarily signs of holiness or divine favor. They can be elaborate traps designed to lead a soul into ultimate arrogance. In this spiritual framework, the Dajjal's supposed miracles, manipulating the weather, creating illusions of wealth, are mere extensions of this trap. A leader might appear incredibly powerful and successful, yet be fundamentally misaligned with the truth. Therefore, corrupt politicians, false holy men, and greedy spiritual guides become, metaphorically speaking, active agents of the Dajjal in the modern world. Some mystics internalized the apocalypse entirely. They taught that the true battlefield is not outside the gates of Jerusalem or Damascus, but within the human heart. The renowned Persian Sufi Allah ad-Dawla Simnani urged his followers to awaken the Mahdi within themselves. By cultivating deep spiritual awareness and justice inside their own souls, they could successfully defeat what he termed the inward Dajjal. In these deeply metaphorical interpretations, the clash between Jesus and the Dajjal symbolizes the eternal struggle between the Ruh, the pure divine spirit, and the Nafs, the lower ego, the instinctual selfish desires of the flesh. The Dajjal becomes the ultimate metaphor for human self-deception, the inflated ego. The spiritual impostor that lives inside all of us, the dark part of the human psyche, that constantly mistakes worldly illusion for eternal truth. Before we conclude, we must mention one of the strangest, most fascinating narratives in all of Dajjal lore. A story that places his origin not in the deserts of the East, but lost in the uncharted oceans of the West. This version centers around a historical figure named Tamim ad-Dari. Tamim was a Christian priest who converted to Islam during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad. According to a highly famous and widely authenticated hadith, Tamim approached the Prophet and recounted an incredible, terrifying adventure. Before his conversion, Tamim and his crew were sailing the seas when a violent, relentless storm blew their ship radically off course. For an entire month, they were tossed by the waves until they were shipwrecked on a strange, uncharted, mysterious island, possibly located somewhere in the far west, near the Mediterranean or North Africa. Upon exploring the island, the stranded sailors encountered a bizarre, monstrous beast covered in so much thick hair that they couldn't distinguish its front from its back. The beast introduced itself as Al-Jassasa, meaning the spy or the informer. The demonic creature instructed the terrified crew to enter a ruined monastery deep within the island. Inside the dark monastery, they found a giant of a man, larger and more robust than any human they had ever seen. He was heavily shackled, his hands bound to his neck with thick iron chains, writhing in agitation. When the sailors approached, the chained giant immediately began interrogating them with desperate intensity. "What is the condition of the palm trees of Baisan?" he demanded. "Has the lake of Tiberias dried up yet? What is the situation among the unlettered Arabs? Has a prophet appeared among them yet?" After the sailors answered his frantic questions, informing him that the Prophet Muhammad had indeed appeared in Mecca and migrated to Medina, the giant made a chilling declaration. He told them that he was the Messiah, the false Messiah. He revealed that his chains would eventually be broken and he would be released to travel the earth. He boasted that he would conquer every single city on the globe within 40 days, except for Mecca and Medina, which would be barred to him by angels. The physical description of the chained giant, his obsession with the holy cities, and his bizarre prophetic knowledge made it instantly clear to the Prophet Muhammad upon hearing the story. Tamim ad-Dari had physically encountered the Dajjal, alive, heavily chained, waiting on a secluded island for the appointed hour of his release. This incredible story of Tamim ad-Dari became massively popular. In medieval North African Muslim communities, it actually inspired its own entire genre of nautical adventure literature, blending Islamic eschatology with high seas exploration. As you can tell from these rich, varied, and occasionally terrifying stories, the Dajjal is an incredibly complex figure. Much like the Antichrist in Christianity, he is not a single, perfectly uniform character across every single historical text. In some reports, he marches from the dust of Khorasan. In others, he emerges from the conflict zones of Syria and Iraq. Some traditions indicate he has been alive since the time of the Prophet, chained in agony on a forgotten island in the West. Other texts treat him strictly as a future human being, born only at the very end of time. This incredible narrative flexibility did not stop in the medieval era. It continues today. Modern Muslim thinkers, sociologists, and scholars frequently reimagine the Dajjal, not just as a literal monster, but as a profound symbol of larger, destructive systemic forces. To many today, the Dajjal represents the blinding forces of secular extremism, unchecked hypermaterialism, the military-industrial complex, digital deception, and global political corruption that currently plagues our world. Whether viewed as a literal, one-eyed tyrant waiting to be unleashed, or as a powerful metaphor for the dark forces of deception embedded in modern society, Al-Masih ad-Dajjal remains the great deceiver of Islamic tradition. He is the ultimate figure of trial, the embodiment of distortion, and the purveyor of false, hollow power. But there is a deeply hopeful core to all of these apocalyptic traditions. They are equally clear on one absolute, unshakable truth. The Dajjal's power is strictly temporary. It is an illusion. By taking refuge in faith, maintaining moral integrity, and refusing to trade spiritual truth for worldly convenience, believers are assured that they can withstand his trials. The darkness, no matter how absolute it seems, is fleeting. When the day of judgment finally arrives, truth will inherently banish falsehood, and the great deceiver will melt away into nothingness.